Thank you, Robert. Hello. Hello, good morning, everybody. My name's Ian Critchley. I'm the Global Business Development Skills Lead for KPMG International. I'm based in the UK, but my client base is truly global. I'm looking forward to talking with you a little bit later on around L&D consultancy. So I look forward to working with you today.
Thank you, Ian. I'm Gilles Mulders. I need to already tell you, and you've probably guessed, that English is not my mother tongue. So I'm based in Paris, working for IHG, here in Paris and in London as well. Intercontinental Hotels Group, and I've been in L&D for now about 10 years, and I'm also very much looking forward to your many questions and the rest of the day, really. Thank you.
Thank you. And so just a bit more about myself. My name is Robert Ashcroft. I'm the Head of Learning for Santander UK. And I've been in learning now for about 13 years, always working at Santander. So I'm on a bit later and I'll talk you through our little case study and my potted history of what it's been like to work for an organisation that has been the same employer but not necessarily the same brand, if you get my meaning. So we'll work through that a little later. But without any further ado, let's get cracking with the first question. So, like I say, try and make this as interactive as possible so it doesn't become one of those sessions that you're just dying for the next coffee break and getting into your networking sessions. So, given that Gilles got the mic, I think Gilles can go first with the answering of this one. So the question initially is, how are you preparing for the future now, and what advice do you have for others?
And we had those questions in advance, right, a little bit. So I spent, as I usually do, last night thinking about it. And the future is an interesting topic, right? We have many trends coming over. Technology is one of them, and I know that Rob will speak about it a little bit later. One of the things that I thought of recently is that generation issue that we're seeing. You know, I mean, you've learned about Gen Y before. I'm actually a bit more concerned about some of those people which we call the silver wave. And those are, in our industry, that's travel industry obviously, the people who have disposable income, right? They're not holding on the money. They don't want to, unfortunately for some of us, pass on the money to the kids. That's not their interest. They'll spend the inheritance. And they have the money, they have the time, and they like to travel. So an interesting type of people. And so when I'm looking at the future, certainly in the Western world where we are, I'm thinking about how are those people going to interact with our employees in the hotels, which will be at the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of how they see life, in terms of how they interact, and what is this clash going to be. So it asks more questions than it answers. I'm thinking about how we need to change our recruitment, what sort of skills we're looking for the future, and I guess one of the key skills is that sort of connectivity or creating human connections with people. And then one of the skills as well that I'm looking for is adaptability, very much. Flexibility and adaptability in a world that is going so fast and changes so fast. So that's my concern, and that's what I don't have an answer for yet. But maybe, Ian, you have an answer for me.
Yeah, that's not good. You know, it's interesting, and I'm sure when we get feedback from you guys as well, there'll be an awful lot of alignment between what we're all thinking about and what we see the future being. For me, the future is around how do we best service the whole client. So we don't just look at part of a problem, we don't just look at part of the needs that our client have. We look at it holistically, and then we equip our business to address that holistic need. And I think the challenge for me is partly around mindset and partly around skill set. From a skill set perspective, it's appreciating that we don't necessarily need to deepen skill sets, but we need to broaden them. And the other thing for me is around creating a comfort in ambiguity. So I guess creating an acceptance it's okay to not have the right answer there and then, but it's absolutely okay to continue the conversation and ask some more questions to more fully understand what the needs are. Because my belief is, in any of our organisations, we are wonderfully networked and wonderfully connected. And actually, most likely 99 times out of 100, we have the solution or access to the solution within our organisation. But right now, I don't think we're as well connected as we could be to say, well, actually, is that something we could help you with? Or is that not something that I know about, so let's move on and talk about something I do know about? So I think it's about servicing the whole client.
Very good. So at this point, does anybody else have a view on this question yourselves? Are you doing anything quite purposeful in your organisations around preparing for the future? Or in particular, do you have any follow-up questions at this point? Very good.
Yeah, just a follow-up question for Ian. So you're just talking about having the solutions within the company to create those networks of peer-to-peer. And I get the sense that maybe having those solutions but not necessarily using them to the best potential, perhaps. Can you give any examples of what kind of solutions you've discovered that maybe have already been there and maybe thought, why aren't we using this? It's a great opportunity to create that peer-to-peer learning or networking.
So we can hear Matt very well here. I don't know about.
So Matt was just asking if I could give examples of that. I think maybe the best example I can give you is around the strength of the network. So often when we go and talk to our clients, and when I talk to my clients, I talk to internal clients generally. When the people I'm working with talk, they go and talk to external clients. Is we have a set of skills or knowledge which we're very comfortable with, and we have things outside of that we're maybe less comfortable with, sometimes very uncomfortable with. And actually, it's to what extent do we try and turn the conversation to talk about something we believe we're an expert in? How comfortable are we to have conversations outside that area of comfort? And how comfortable are we to then say, actually, that's a great point. I don't have the answer. Let me go away and find it. And the example I have time and time again, and I'm sure it's equally pertinent in your organisations, is actually we don't maximise our internal networks as much as we could do. So this idea of coming together and talking about challenges that we see our clients or we see us having. And time after time I hear great anecdotes about situations where 2, 3, 4 more people have come together, and in the midst of a conversation, I'm sure, like the coffee conversations we'll have today, that someone will talk about a problem and someone else say, there's this, or have you thought about this? And all of a sudden, 2 disparate bits of information come together and create an opportunity to move forward or create an idea. And I think that's what we're talking about, that connectivity to best service the provision of solutions, both internally and for our broader client base.
Thank you.
Can I add something to this? I think and it's probably the same in many organizations, L&D is sometimes a little bit alone. So we're surrounded by experts, right? All of our heads of departments, however you call them, are experts in their field, experts in finance, experts in operations, etc. And we sometimes tend to want to be the expert as well in those different departments, but we're not really expert in L&D. And I think that's creating that brand of thing like, well, I don't really know, and I'm okay actually not knowing as much as you do, dear colleague, in terms of that expertise. But one thing that I know really well is how to make people learn or to help people learn. And so that would be the key thing for me. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next question, because I've just looked at my watch, and this time's running fast, which is great. I hope it's running fast for you as well and not dragging. Is that right? Maybe. Next question. What drivers of change are you most conscious about and why? So this is personal insight from us up here about what we think the drivers of change are and why. So Ian, do you want to kick off with this one?
It's a great question, and I really would like to make sure we have time to hear this from you guys in the audience as well. For me, the biggest driver of change is competitors. It's the discontinuity that we're seeing around who our competitors are and what our competitors are doing. And I don't know what it's like for you in your businesses, but if it's anything like my experience, is that we are working against sounds doesn't quite. We're competing with people or organisations we never even considered to be competitors in the past. We're looking at solutions or needs that we never considered in the past, and so I think it's recognising the competitive landscape, the legislative landscape, the economic landscape that we are operating in has changed and continues to change at such an exponential rate. I'll show you some stats in my presentation later on from a CEO survey we did in October last year. And if you look at the uncertainties that we see right now around things like, you know, EU membership, oil price, and so on and so forth, even between now and then, which is 6 months, I think if we redid the survey now, the results would be quite radically different. And I think that pace of change that we're seeing within the competitive landscape is, I think, for us, the biggest challenge. Absolutely.
I tend to agree. You're convincing me on that one very much. Yeah, I thought about, for our field, basically, is the availability of information. Everything's available. Knowledge is not it's not our job anymore. It used to be. We used to be able to, you know, convey knowledge. And I remember, you know, 10 years ago when I was putting together PowerPoint, actually no, transparencies. That was probably a bit more than 10 years ago, right? So yeah, and sort of do research, you know, go to library, get books, and find inspiring things to sort of deliver. No, it's all there. We don't have the monopoly of information. Information is available everywhere. So it's you could see this as being, oh my God, it's the end of L&D, right? I mean, you know, knowledge is freely available. So what are we there for? And I think it's not, it's the beginning of L&D. That's a change that if we choose to ride that wave, we can make it easy for people to learn, because the big thing now is there's so much out there that it's getting overwhelming for our colleagues to be able to actually learn and know what to learn. So it's that move, if you want, from delivering content to curating content, which I think is key to the future of L&D in terms of change. Yeah.
Thank you. From my personal viewpoint, I'd agree clearly with both panelists. I like that quote that it's now the beginning of L&D because knowledge is so readily accessible. But also resonates within banking that all these new competitors that are starting to eat a little bit of the value chain within banking. So they may not try to be a full bank, but they'll try to run on a payments service. So big brands like Apple Pay, PayPal, people like that, but also new entrants who are bringing like artificial intelligence and robo-advice is a big thing that's starting to emerge. And these little organisations that all start to stack up, which individually aren't a threat, but as a collective, they pretty much eat away at everything. And so as an organisation like Santander, we need to change quickly. And I think that, for us, is one of our key drivers of change. So you've heard our view on what we've kind of distilled. Just as a quick fire, do you have anything burning in your mind that is a quick, you know, driver of change right now in your worlds that's any different or similar? Well, right at the back. I like that. You're going to make him move. Brilliant. Go, go, go.
We have the next one.
Yeah, the one down here next.
Yeah, moving is exactly what I haven't been doing for the last 2 hours. I've been on the orbital car park, the M25. In terms of drivers of change, I think we're coming on to it later, but I mean, and you've touched on it as well, particularly with reference to banking. I mean, tech.
Yeah.
Tech awareness, I think, is kind of a subgroup within that. And I don't believe in generational difference. At my age, I can't afford to. But I mean, clearly we talk about Gen X, Gen Y, we talk about what they're used to, what comes naturally, we talk about digital natives and so on. But I think tech, in the broadest sense, and the ability to work with tech, I mean, that's just monumental these days.
Very good. Thank you for that. Any other views? Brilliant. So we're all not in a period of change. Or is it that still that pre-9 o'clock watershed? Coffee's yet to kick in. Here we go. Brilliant.
Hello. So my name's Linda Litherland. I'm Head of Learning and Development at High Speed 2, which is going to be the new high-speed rail link from Euston to Birmingham and beyond. So we are currently a government project, and our biggest change is then becoming a construction organisation from next year. So that is about building huge capability in the organisation, of which we don't know anything of it at the minute because we don't know how to build this thing.
Probably don't tweet that.
Yeah,
No.
well I don't have the skills. So we're on a huge change journey and transformation journey over the next 18 months, really, to build up the right organisation with the right skills and have the right partners on board to be able to do that. So that has ramifications across all the organisation, the different parts, procurement, commercial, whatever. So it's an interesting time for L&D.
Absolutely. I think when you progress through your journey, your case study is going to be a fascinating one, how L&D pretty much has to go through this metamorphosis. You're pretty much supporting HS2 through very different life cycles and genres. Be interesting. Maybe next time you can be up here talking about it. Brilliant. Thank you for that input. Let's move on then. So this is a very lengthy question. However, I won't insult your intelligence by trying to read it word for word, but this is more around the penetration and the dependency on technology, and whether, as a result of that, there's a more perceived fundamental skill gap emerging, and whether you agree or disagree. So this is, as we become more and more immersed into tech and we become highly dependent. I know my journey here this morning, we put the postcode into the sat-nav. My colleague here picked us up and drove us and ignored the sat-nav all the way. So I can categorically say my colleague's not dependent on that level of technology. Had we been, we'd have been somewhere else and late, which is a thankful thing. But as a result of that dependency, what other skills might therefore be emerging as a gap? What's your views?
This is a really interesting one, and I'll give a number of context. I think there's a risk. I think from my perspective, I don't see it as a reality right now, but I do think as learning leaders and as organisations, we do need to ask ourselves the question of what's the right balance. You know, if I look at what I do in the morning, I get up and I check my phone, I go to work, I open my computer, and I type most of the day. You know, I don't write a great deal apart from when I'm scribbling a few notes. And actually many of my colleagues put their notes on their iPad now. And so the reality is that, you know, our working lives are driven by technology, and some of the basic skills around numeracy, literacy, are being eroded. But if we look at how we onboard people, how we hire people, certainly within professional services, we still do aptitude testing. You know, there is still various different tests that will assess numeracy and literacy. And certainly from an accountancy perspective, you've got to be blinking good with your numbers. And if you look at, you know, the traditional qualification process, there is still a huge amount of what you call the traditional way of working. For me, I think we're some way away from it yet, but I think having an awareness of it is an interesting one. And I think as a learning leader, and potentially as a people or an HR leader, this is a good question to be asking, to say what is the right balance. My sense is that I think we are okay right now, but if I look at my children and the way they learn in school, my sense is that there is still a dependency on reading and writing, on, you know, numeracy and literacy, and my sense is that that won't change until you get really into tertiary education. The question is, I guess, is what are the key skills as employers that we want? And how do we make sure we get that balance right? And I'm not sure if I've got the answer. Gil?
Here's the answer. No. Yeah, I think, you know, you're telling us that we're not right there where the skill gap is present. I think in the service industry, we are there. And I'll just tell you a story. I'm back from a tour of European universities to recruit for graduate programs. So I got all these youngsters, right, I mean 20-ish, that are you know, hoping to be part of our graduate program, and we go through interviews, we do presentations in schools, etc., all over Europe. And I was shocked. I was shocked at the level of social skills that those young people have. I mean, you've got someone from a major, I mean, these are hotel schools or, you know, hotel universities, so you've got a major employer, 5,000 hotels, I mean, one of the biggest players in the industry coming over to your school. You'd expect that those people would come to you, right? Shake hands, introduce themselves, do a bit of chit-chat. Well, I think out of probably, I don't know, 500 I met in the tour, throughout all this university, there's probably about 10 I would remember. And I remember their names, and they've actually got conversation, and it's shocking. So I did tell them, right? At the third presentation that I did in that school, I thought, like, wait a minute, right? Can you put your phones down? So presentation, right? Okay. And I'm being like a school teacher, which I hate, but I think that is to me sort of the generation gap. Maybe it's me, right? Maybe I should have WhatsApped with them, and that would have been the right thing to do, right? But I think in the service industry, this is what people need. That's still what our customers want. Some of you, you're away from home, you're going into a hotel. Maybe you'd like to have, a bartender or a receptionist that actually can have conversation with you. And that I think is a big risk in the industry. For service, but I think in other industries as well, because we're talking about, I'm thinking about our guests, but think colleagues to colleagues. How's the interaction? How are ideas being communicated? Where is the excitement? Where's the engagement? If everyone's on their tablet all the time. So that's a risk for me. Yeah.
Interesting. I would echo with Jill about the social skills piece. A vast element of Santander, as you're probably aware, is a service industry. It's our branch and telephony network. And so whilst they are pretty much tech savvy and able to adapt quickly and want to work at pace and have very short attention spans, actually that in some cases that lack of social awareness is pretty key. The fundamental things that you want to have to make small talk, this thing called small talk that we've grown up with and we're used to, isn't something that's kind of rife within certain circles who are coming into the organisation. So for us in L&D, it's how do you train that? How do you help people understand the world for a generation that they're not part of? That's their parents and their grandparents. And actually, what is social norms to them is very different to the organisation that they've joined. So it's not just, I think in my view, one way. It's not about trying to indoctrinate people into the organisation to be like we've always have been, but to try and cross-merge those skill sets, to try and take those strengths that they do bring and try and reverse mentor in some respects back into the organisation, I think is. So the skill gap in my view isn't just about this emerging generation, but some of the existing incumbent generation as well. So that's our view. What would you view? Are there any skill gaps that are immediate? Lady in the middle here. Here comes Jason's on the move. I'm going to get you a jumpsuit for next time. Bit of Annika Rice action.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm from Samsung. I think there's a challenge for us as an L&D community in terms of our skill set. When we talk about training emerging talent, I think there's as much for us to learn in terms of how we've always done things, and that expectation that our learners will have their phones away in their bags and they won't use their tablets. We need to kind of move on a little bit from that and embrace that if we're looking to have a more diverse workforce and bring new and smart, bright things into our organisations, we need to enable them to learn how they want to learn, not how our generation perhaps did. Yeah. So it's more about a gap for us as learning professionals.
Good point. It's a good segue into my talk at 4 o'clock. Yeah, I know. It keeps me here that long. That and the cocktails at 5:30. Any other views? Here we go. Don't apologise, we like the interaction.
So this is a bit of a personal bugbear of mine, really, because I suppose I think there's a bit of a hiatus between what organisations would like and what the schools are actually preparing our children for. Okay. And I think that's where I think there's a gap. I talk from personal experience. I've got 2 children that have come through the schooling system and have come out having no idea what's available to them to do in this world of work, no idea what careers are out there. There's very little available, and therefore I think there's a gap, or there's a responsibility maybe on us as organisations to help young adults prepare for the world of work. And even when at that time when I offered, you know, there's a whole room full of parents here who work in organisations, why don't you invite them in? The schools didn't really know how to go about doing it.
Interesting.
So I think there's an element on us working with our schools. You know, most of us have got children, or some of us, you know. So that was my view. But in HS2, what we're trying to do is sort of build a whole skills and education programme, working with primary schools, actually, because some of those people that are at school now will be working on this project in 10, 20 years' time. So, and also we want to engage more women into engineering and construction, so we're trying to sort of start an education piece, but that's for one industry. I just think, you know, as a broad spectrum of industries here, I think there's more we can do to actually try and help our youngsters.
Good. Thank you. Very good. Okay, let's move on to the fourth question then. So this one is around the plausibility that as consumers but also as colleagues, our expectations may swing away from technology. So you often hear about how Facebook is dying out because teenagers aren't using it anymore because they're using something else, or actually they may be talking, who knows, probably not. But there's this swing away from technology and demand a more human connectivity. So I know we banter with my colleagues about whether this is on the horizon or not. So this might split opinion, but as we get more heavily ingrained in technology, is it plausible that in the near future there may be an active move away from tech? And do you see any of that now manifesting itself in your organisations? Jill?
I think so. I think that there's the excitement phase of technology, and Facebook was exciting. And we're sort of moving away from the excitement. It's becoming part of everyday life. So it's less exciting, it gets less focus, it's just part of it. So it won't die out. I don't think technology will always be there, but the focus will not be on technology much anymore. I think the focus will be on human connectivity. And I think you can see trends appearing and people wanting to get together, and the success of personal development. People who want to learn about neuro-linguistic programming, transactional analysis, all of those human skills, coaching, is proving that people want more connectivity. They truly learn when they're facing their fears, they're digging into psychology, and that sort of interest, to me, is an interest for human connectivity. So technology will still be there, but there is an element of a desire for people to connect again.
This is a really interesting question, and I go back to the comment that was made at the back around challenging us as learning leaders around our capability. But for me, I think the answer to this question is around making sure we choose the right tool for the right job, and not being forced down the route of saying we need to use more e-learning, we need to do more of this, we need to do more of that. There are going to be some aspects of learning and development which lend themselves beautifully to e-learning. There are going to be some aspects which lend themselves to video bites or to different streamed solutions. But there are going to be some skills which lend themselves to interaction. And so, particularly in my area of passion around business development skills, I asked myself the question, what proportion of our client interactions are done virtually? And actually, it's a percentage, but it's not, it's not the majority. And therefore, why should we be spending the majority of time training people virtually? Whereas actually, if we're doing something around communicating or making an impact, some of the learning is not going to be through what you say, it's going to be through how you interact, how the dynamics in the room are, and you simply can't pick that up. And so, for me, I think it's about choosing the right tool to solve the right problem, and it's not putting the solution, it's not putting the medium before you really understand what the need is. And I think, we talk about blended solutions. Certainly in my organisation, I hear talking about blended solutions. But I think it's challenging to say, well, remember, one of the blended solutions is going to be instructor-led, face-to-face, whatever you want to call it. And actually, what I tend to find is that smaller bites of different types of learning at the right time, using the right means, is more likely to be the most successful solution.
Mhm.
And I think that is going to be, it's an answer that's right for us now, has been right for the future, and will continue to be right, in the future.
Very good, thank you. Any views from the floor? No, interesting. So there's a term that I came across recently. So in our organisation, we've often talked about multi-channel, and then recently omnichannel, this ability to start on one device and carry on that service on another device. There was a term recently that it was new to me, which was called opti-channel, which kind of resonates with what Ian was talking about, which was choosing the right method for the right level of interaction, not just in L&D, but also in the service industry as well. So I think the classic example was, how now, maybe you don't, but Domino's Pizza, you can order a pizza and you can see who's cooking it and when it's about to go in the oven and all that kind of stuff. Brilliant, you order it on your phone, but they send you an update via email. And so what they've realised actually quite quickly is that most people of that generation may not check their email consciously every minute of every day. They might do it once, twice a week, or actually may never do it because it's full of junk and spam. And so what they realised was their optimum channel for connectivity was the wrong space. They'd used an efficiency, because it was more cost effective to do email, than actually trying to figure out what that connectivity, the optimum channel for that connectivity is. And I think, previously in L&D, maybe I'm not alone in this, we've jumped on the e-learning bandwagon. Really, is that because it's the most optimum channel, or because it was the most efficient channel and scalable channel? And so, really, I think in my space, I don't necessarily see a push away from technology, but I see push away from the channel that L&D are choosing that is probably an indicator that it's the wrong channel and not an abstination from tech. It's just they don't want to do the e-learning. Send me a workbook.
Can I ask, maybe with a show of hands, it's an interesting point here, and it goes back to, again, what we talked about earlier. How many of you are having conversations where, leaders are coming up with solutions, but then are unwilling to fund it when you tell them how much it's really going to cost? Yeah? And I think it's one of these things is, actually there's an awful lot of factors that we need to consider when we're thinking about what the right solution is. And if the right solution is going to be cost-driven or cost-limited, then actually we may need to be crossing some of the really, interesting, interactive, maybe e-based things off the list, because the upfront costs to develop some of that content are high.
Very good, thank you. Okay, final question before we go into your peer-to-peer networking session then. So, what, if anything, does the L&D play in your employee value proposition? So considering for a moment that potential employees may well be more particular about who they want to go and work for, what space does L&D play in that attraction strategy?
This is something I'm really passionate and very proud of for my organisation, because I think continuous professional development or learning for life is such an essential part of really effective employee value proposition. And I think it's one of the things I see, my organisation in some cases leading the way, or in some cases leading certain ideas. So the idea of subsidising students at school to go through university. So to make something which, due to their individual means may not be affordable and turn it into a career is something that KPMG in the UK championed at quite early stage. One of the things I tend to look at is I look at the stats around what proportion of our promotions are internal versus external direct hires. And actually, as I look up our organisation, the thing that I'm really tremendously proud of is that the very vast majority of our promotions are internal promotions. And I think what that shows is, as an organisation, we're getting something right around not only bringing in brilliant people at the base of our organisation, but then giving them the skills and development as part of their career to become those exceptional leaders. So I think it is something which should be inextricably linked to each other, and it's something, certainly from my organisation, I'm very proud of.
Yeah, Yeah, I've got a sort of a slightly different view on that question, as in, I don't think that L&D will be a unique selling point for or employer branding or for attracting people into the organization anymore. If you look at it, and that's feedback from those, we call them emerging talents, so those young people at universities, what they're looking for is a career, so career planning, definitely, big right up there in what will attract them to a company. In terms of L&D, they all know that they can learn by themselves. A lot of them are, I don't know if you've heard about, and I know it's not one of the suppliers over here, but lynda.com. Now, lynda.com is a video-based learning platform that started in the US. It's now been bought by LinkedIn. And it's actually very much B2C. They in the US, most of their clients are individual people who like to learn. They register to the platform, and they get all those videos and tutorials and courses on any topic you could imagine, from baking cookies to delivering powerful presentations, right? So anything. So learning is there. It's available. It's not a privilege of being in one company. You can actually do it, on your own, and it's fairly inexpensive. I think giving them a little bit of a view on their future, career planning is huge, and making sure, if you think about organizations like Google that attract quite a few people, it's about your employer brand, it's about the values of the company. Does that actually fit with the values of these individuals? And if your L&D offer fits within that sort of general culture of your company, and that culture is attractive, then you will have a very attractive company, and you'll have loads of CVs coming to you.
Any view from the floor then? Anybody who perhaps has learning and development or a mix of other things in your EVP that you're using quite successfully? Anybody willing to share? I love this. I like asking a question because you get rapid eye movement. It's amazing. It's really good. Just share a bit of insight. I'm a guest speaker on some of our induction courses every now and again. So I ask the question, why have you joined Santander? Invariably, it's not necessarily an attraction, but it's something they weren't getting at their previous organisation, which resonates with the whole I'd hit a point where I couldn't see where I was going kind of conversation. I didn't have a plan, I didn't have a career, I was stuck in a job, it was just routine, and I'm hoping that working for this organisation, it might be different. So it wasn't necessarily in the canvassing that I've done an attraction strategy of Santander currently, although I think we might ultimately start tapping into that a lot more. But it was the absence of that kind of progression, that view, that career plan, that was forming a good proportion, I dare say over 50% of the people that I asked, was because they got stuck in their previous organisation. So it just made me think, actually, when we're advertising roles to come and work for Santander, we're not playing on the career development that's available. We're not playing on, if you join in this role, here's where you could end up. We're not playing on the significant success that many of our internal applicants have gone through over the years in the grading system, and now we're maybe MD of a major division, having started on the counter. So for me, it's something that Santander is probably, we're desperately going to be working on in the next 12 months to really not just focus on the learning and development, but the consequence, the benefit of working at an organisation like ours, and I'm presuming across many of yours as well, that actually the prospects of future development and growth is something that I think we want to leverage. Any views, final views before we break? Wonderful. Oh, Mark.
It's just very quickly to say that I agree with what you were talking about there, and as part of what we're doing, and a big part of influencing of what we do in learning and development is storytelling. It's a big part of growing our learning culture at the moment, because it is that kind of going back to like the what's in it for me.
Yeah.
And me as an L&D sort of specialist can say, well, from a learning point of view, this and this, but we're now bringing in those success stories.
Yeah.
Where they're saying, not just at learning and development, but in their storytelling, they're saying, I got here in my career, and part of that was the management development program.
Yeah.
And what I got out of that was this, and this, and how I got there was this, and the different channels and the blended learning and things like that.
Yeah.
So rather than me doing it and our L&D team, we're using other people in the company now to kind of be our L&D ambassadors and be our storytellers about that success, and we're using it in recruitment as well. So the graduate sort of programs, sort of building the next generation, is again, I'm going to be biased of saying I'm an L&D specialist and this is what I can offer you. We're actually getting other people to say, well, this is what I've got out of it, and when it comes to learning and development, this is what I've got from a personal point of view, and this is where it fitted into my career journey.
Very good, thank you. Quick show of hands, is anybody else doing that kind of thing? Yeah, interesting, okay. I may be seeking you out later. And on that note, thank you very much for your time, and thank you to our panellists.